I don't understand why she didn't have that gun put up.
A child shoots and kills another child inside this home. We're live on the scene with what police and neighbors say they saw and heard.
Suspects in custody, the similarities between the two teen abduction cases, and why the timelines for their Amber Alerts were not the same.
I'll walk you through a weekend with some major up and down temperatures, plus the potential for severe weather on the horizon.
Thank you for joining us tonight at 7 o'clock, everyone. I'm Dan Haggerty. So we are starting the newscast tonight on a really difficult story. 2 children playing with a gun, and now one of them has died. Sky 5 over the scene here. This is where it happened in Henderson. Their grandmother telling us that the 3-year-old grandson got a hold of the gun and accidentally shot her 5-year-old granddaughter. WRAL's Willie Danley in Henderson. Live for us tonight. To say this is a terrible story would be an understatement. Willie, what else do we know?
Well, Dan, I've spoken to some people here in Henderson, and they tell me this is an extremely difficult story to hear. A child gaining access to an unsecured weapon, shooting and killing another child. Take a look at this video. This is what WRAL captured on the scene this morning. According to the Henderson police chief, when officers arrived around 9:30, they found a child suffering from a gunshot wound. That child died not long after. The preliminary investigation concluded that a child had access to an unsecured weapon, discharged it, shooting and killing that other child. As Dan said, WRAL spoke to the grandmother of the child who was killed, and she tells us that it was a 5-year-old girl. I spoke to Fawn Dockery, who's a local father whose daughter was shot and killed by another child. Since his daughter's death, he's been working on legislation to increase gun safety. Just as in his daughter's case, he believes an adult should be held accountable for this.
Don't ever think this can't happen to you, because it wasn't my daughter's fault that she was killed. But in a situation where there was unpreparedness on the adult side on the other end, there was recklessness and irresponsibility on the gun owner on the other end.
Dockery went on to tell me, as a gun owner, it's never too young to teach a child the importance of gun safety and respect for those weapons. As far as this investigation goes, it's still under investigation. Willie Danley, WRAL News, live in Henderson.
Our hearts with that family tonight, Willie. Thank you. And WRAL has done a lot of reporting on this topic of unsecured guns in homes where children can get a hold of them, kids. It was the subject of a WRAL documentary, Unsafe, North Carolina Kids Dying from Gun Violence. And it tells stories of families changed forever, not just because of gun violence, but because of unsecured guns and tragedies like this that can happen. You can watch the documentary right now on WRALdoc.com. Raleigh has a new police chief. Chief Estella Patterson, the last day on the job is tomorrow, and the department is going to go ahead and promote from within. This is Rico Boyce. He served in the Raleigh Police Department for the last 25 years. You might recognize him. WRAL's Aaron Thomas is covering this story for us tonight. Aaron, you've been learning a little bit more about Boyce's approach now to law enforcement as he takes on this big job.
Yeah, that's correct, Anna. At this moment, we're still waiting for a sit-down interview with the incoming police chief, but we did learn earlier this week during a community forum that he already has a plan in place by working alongside attorneys on the local, state, and federal levels when it comes to tackling crime. Here's a bit about Boyce. Of course, he's been here for the past 25 years, coming here in the year 2000. He's held a number of positions, of course, starting off as a patrol officer. He was later an investigator, a detective, and a deputy chief, covering a variety of crimes before being promoted to the police chief. He was the preferred finalist for the Raleigh Police Protective Association, and that's a group that represents more than 450 sworn officers. They all noted his institutional knowledge, saying that it would benefit the city's residents and the police force. I asked one of their organizers what they're looking forward to in this partnership.
He is focused on what we are, which is the priority of recruitment and retention, particularly retention. And these pay raises that we expect to get this year, I think he's going to be instrumental in helping us get them because he supports that.
And of course, this new promotion comes as a result of Chief Estella Patterson, who is retiring. And of course, her last day is, of course, today. Back to you.
All right. Thank you, Aaron. Property taxes in Durham. I-40 reopens at the state line. And UNC is going to be on Hard Knocks. We got 5 things that you should know right now. Sky 5 over the scene here of this house fire in Raleigh. This is Saybrook Drive. You can see the fire destroyed the side of the roof there. The family that lives there not going to be able to stay there tonight, as you can probably tell from just looking at this video. We also are told that the fire did some damage to a neighboring home. Fortunately, no one was hurt. The man accused of killing Wake County Deputy Ned Byrd is back in the United States. Alder Marin Sotelo has been extradited from Mexico. He was indicted on first-degree murder in August of 2022. A trial date is still in the works. Tomorrow, big news here. I-40 will reopen at the North Carolina-Tennessee border. A portion of that interstate has been closed for months after Hurricane Helene hit western North Carolina and did a lot of damage to that roadway. One lane will be open, just one in each direction. The max speed limit, 35 miles per hour, taking it slow through there. Today, Durham County's new home appraisals went out in the mail. The county hasn't done a countywide appraisal for a while, since 2019. Now, remember, you can appeal these assessments. You can find instructions on how to do so on the Durham County website. HBO's Hard Knocks is heading to Chapel Hill and featuring the Tar Heels and the new head coach there, Bill Belichick. Front Office Sports, they first reported this news, and apparently no NFL team was interested in doing the series. So they thought, what other story had people been talking about? Yeah, Chapel Hill. To be clear, this isn't the traditional training camp version of the show. This is the off-season version, but should be interesting.
And some breaking news in the WRAL Live Center. Goldsboro police are investigating a deadly shooting. This happened just before 5:30 today. Happened on North Berkeley Boulevard, right by West New Hope Road. Officers were responding to reports of shots fired, and when they got to that scene, they found a man dead there. And a second victim showed up at a local hospital with gunshot wounds. This is still under investigation.
All right, Carly, thank you so much. So we've had some Amber Alerts ringing up our phones this week here in the area. And both of those cases, both Amber Alerts here this week, led to human trafficking charges. The victims in both cases are 15-year-old girls. 2 people were charged in the case that was out of Harnett County. 2 people were charged in the case out of Siler City. WRAL's Destiny Patterson gets a closer look at the Siler City case and how police found the teenage victim.
Here in Siler City, the police chief has not done any interviews, but he did tell us that they found the teen about 30 minutes away in Asheboro with a 23-year-old man. He was one of 2 people that they arrested in connection to her abduction.
2 suspects, Ronnie Suarez and Saul Ramirez Guevara, are facing several charges, including first-degree kidnapping, human trafficking of a child victim, and soliciting a child by computer. Siler City police say the 2 were involved in a 15-year-old's abduction. With the help of the FBI and the State Bureau of Investigation, they found her with Suarez in Asheboro. This is the second situation of its kind just this week.
It is very, very rare for us to have 2 Amber Alerts due to some type of non-family member this close in with each other. And it's even more rare for us to have an alert that's been kind of attributed to human trafficking.
Authorities found a 15-year-old girl from Harnett County and Dare County. 2 men are now in custody facing similar kidnapping and human trafficking charges.
They are minors. They are victims. They're being manipulated.
Anytime you have that type of outside adult who may or may not have the child's best interest at heart, that's when it does kind of raise a red flag to us.
Amber Alerts went out for both teams. Marissa Moyer's office is in charge of the alerts. The alert for the Siler City teen went out almost a week after the police department initially posted on social media asking for the public's help. The police chief says electronic and surveillance techniques used by an SBI unit led them to request the Amber Alert.
They have to be able to confidently say there's an abduction, and that is why there's that gap sometimes.
The teen is back home safe, but both suspects are in custody awaiting their first court appearance. Destiny Patterson, WRAL News, Chatham County.
It is something to kind of wrap your head around, though, isn't it? 2 15-year-old girls, 2 Amber Alerts right here in our area, 2 human trafficking cases in just 1 week. After the break, a UNC professor that investigates these sorts of things, human trafficking, is going to join us here live, and we're going to talk about just how big the problem is, what we should be paying attention to here locally, and how you can be part of the solution. Kat?
And we've got a cold front on the way for the weekend. February, we saw some extreme ups and downs. We're going to have a lot more on the way for March. I'll outline what to expect as we head into the new month coming up.
So let's get back to what we were talking about right before the break. These two Amber Alerts that we saw this week in our area, one in Harnett County, the other in Siler City. Both of them resulted in charges for human trafficking. Now, we talked a little bit about human trafficking last night here on WRAL News at 7 o'clock, but we do think it's important to keep discussing this because, of course, it is a huge issue. Between 2023 and 2024, the North Carolina Department of Administration, they helped more than 700 human trafficking survivors here in our state. Now, the worldwide numbers are unfathomable. You can't even wrap your head around this. U.S. Customs estimates more than 40 million people have been victims wrapped up in human trafficking. The U.S. set up a human trafficking hotline in 2007, and since then, they have identified more than 2,500 cases with more than 7,000 victims. So joining me tonight is Dean Duncan to talk about this live. He's a research professor at the School of Social Work at UNC Chapel Hill. He's also the principal investigator for the Project No Rest. It's an organization out of UNC that responds to human trafficking, particularly in children. Dean, great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I'd like to start with what might sound kind of like a silly question, but can you explain what human trafficking looks like when we see these stories in the news? And I say that because, you know, for me, sometimes all I really can think about is what I see in the movies and stuff like that. Can you give me an idea of what it looks like in reality, what these people are going through?
It looks, well, what they're going through is they are experiencing a great deal of trauma, and they're doing something that ordinarily they wouldn't do, but they've been motivated by the person who is exploiting them to perform some activity that either so that somebody can make some money out of this process. We generally break trafficking down into sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Some people say that sex trafficking is just a form of labor trafficking, but actually you can easily break those things down. The approach is still the same, that there is an exploiter who recruits somebody in, engages them into performing some activity that they are offering to pay them for or give them some reward. But it's usually what happens is that there is more money being made by the exploiter than there is by the individual who's being trafficked.
So globally, as we've said, human trafficking impacts millions of victims. When we look at the state of North Carolina, how does North Carolina fit into all that? Even here in the country, you think about where we are located, right in the middle of the East Coast. There are major interstates that connect us both to north and south as well as to out west.
Absolutely. Yeah. North Carolina rates, according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, in 2023, North Carolina ranked 8th in the nation in the number of calls to the Human Trafficking Hotline. That was certainly behind California and New York and Texas, who were the larger counties, but ahead of states like Pennsylvania and Georgia in terms of reports. And we also ranked 10th in the number of those reports that came in. We ranked 10th in the nation in the number of cases of human trafficking or instances of human trafficking that were found as a result of those reports.
So the two cases this week, they both involve the internet, adults befriending kids online. I imagine this is becoming more and more prevalent as people are being recruited through social media, through sometimes video games and that sort of thing. We tell parents that kids, should be monitored, but we know kids are savvy, that they might resist that sort of thing. So how aggressive should parents be when it comes to monitoring their kids online? And what can a parent do if they think they have identified a situation where an adult is trying to groom their child?
Well, parents, we all have experiences that those of us with children have experience in working with children and making sure, trying to keep the lines of communication open. And that's a real key piece in terms of trying to protect children who are at home with you, who are living with you, or even as they're not as being teenagers, but even in their earlier years, just to build that warm relationship so that if there are issues that they can tell you about it and you can listen to what they're saying and making sure that you can provide guidance to them about what they're doing or what they should be doing.
Dean, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Okay, sure.
So here is the information. This is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. You can also, that you heard Dean mention a few different times, you can also text 733. If you text that number, it'll give you a link. You can chat with an online specialist there, and there are advocates who are available 24/7. So we have a lot of changes that we have seen in the weather. We've had some rain. It's been cold. Now it's getting warm. Let's talk to Kat.
A lot to talk about in the Weather Center today, even just for your weekend. But I want to remind you, March starts tomorrow. Here's what's normal for the month of March. The normal high in the upper 50s to start the month and upper 60s to end the month. The normal low starting out in the 30s and early March ending in the mid 40s. On average, March is a pretty wet month, but March also is one of those months where we see a lot of ups and downs. And you've got to remember what's normal often is just an average of those extreme highs and lows kind of clumped together. Something interesting, we see some really big extremes when you just look at March in general in Raleigh. The most snow we've had in March was in 1927, 17.8 inches. The warmest day, 93 degrees in 1907, and the coldest, 11 was the low in 1980. So a little bit of everything on the table for March. Tomorrow, we're going to be on one of the warmer days. It will be beautiful, very windy outside tomorrow. So be aware there will be an increased risk for fire danger. Highs are in the mid 70s for Raleigh, Fayetteville, 73 in Durham, Rocky Mount, and Goldsboro. And maybe closer to the mid to upper 60s right toward the Virginia border. The wind is going to make the pollen worse tomorrow. It was high today, high tree pollen, cedar, juniper, elm, and maple were the issues out there today. And when we look ahead, our wind gust forecast tomorrow is going to be in that 25 to 30 mile per hour range throughout the day, but we could see some gusts up to about 35 miles per hour. So very windy, but it's a warming wind that helps us warm up so much tomorrow. The issue is our warming wind then switches to a cooling wind out of the northwest behind this cold front. So you are going to experience much different conditions Saturday compared to Sunday because that front gets here tomorrow. By Sunday, we're down to 48 for the high in Raleigh, 50 in Wilmington, 49 in Fayetteville, just 38 degrees in Boone Sunday. It is going to be sunny and dry out there, but just keep in mind, winter's making a comeback. You may be turning your heat back on by the time we get to Sunday, especially Sunday night. 32 degrees Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Once we get to the midday hours, we're only in the 40s, still 42 at lunchtime, and only warming up into the upper 40s to, at best, low 50s. We quickly dip down into the 20s Sunday night into Monday morning with a hard freeze in the forecast. There's that big temperature drop on the way behind this front. The front will be a dry frontal passage, but we could see some clouds with it. Early next week, we're off to a chilly start, but temperatures rebound. 60s Tuesday, 70s on Wednesday. That could spark the threat for some strong storms, potentially severe storms. We're going to have to keep an eye on that next week. That'll be the big weather story, I believe. But by the end of the week, temperatures kind of even out in the middle ground, kind of like we did this Friday. Dan.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Kat. So everybody knows how the Carolina Hurricanes got their start here in Raleigh. You can spot those Whalers jerseys pretty much every game. But why don't we throw it back a bit further to the days of the Raleigh Ice Caps? Your Friday moment of nostalgia is right after the break. The Carolina Hurricanes highlighted their history this week. Last night was Whalers night. It is the sixth time that the team hosted a throwback game, paying homage to the Hartford Whalers. The team, you may remember, relocated from Connecticut to Raleigh in 1997, getting a new home and a new name. Fun fact, they've actually never lost on a Whalers night, and last night they won again. You don't just see those green jerseys, though, for the throwback games. Fans wear them all the time, and most people around here know all about the Whalers. But do you know about the Ice Caps, the minor league team they used to call Raleigh home? You see, when the Whalers relocated, the Ice Caps did too. There's a WRAL sports fan podcast that tells this entire story. You should check it out. It's pretty interesting. We went into the WRAL archive to find a story from the days when the Ice Caps played at Dorton Arena. So have a great weekend. We're going to leave you with this, your Friday moment of nostalgia.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Here come your Raleigh Ice Caps. The Raleigh Ice Caps are hot. And this far south, it's almost hard to believe you'd find fans dedicated to hockey.
It sold itself in the South, and it continues to do that.
You have to appreciate the talents that these people have, their skating ability. If you haven't tried it, it's an experience.
Crowds have been real good. Our attendance is about where it was last year. We've had a number of sellouts, and we usually sell out during the weekend, and on the weeknights we have a little less crowd.
The Ice Caps play in a building designated to showcase Holsteins, not hockey. That has a lot of people talking about a new arena.
I think we're going to have to build an arena, sports arena. They talked about baseball arenas and all this. We need a hockey arena here.
It's a situation where we'd like to have a little larger venue, but right now that's not on the table. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Dorton Arena, you sit so close to the ice that it's just like they're playing in your lap.
The intimate atmosphere is part of the fun here. The same fans continue to show up day after day and make the crowd a large part of the game.
We present it in a family atmosphere, and we try to make it fun to come to. It's a big social event. The fact that we're playing good hockey and it's real exciting just adds to
it. Keep watching WRAL News over the air Channel 34 and Spectrum Channel 1257.